Welcome to STEPS, a staff training program run by the Office of Graduate Research at Flinders University. Hello, I'm Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to this training session, part of our STEP training session on the Artefact and Exegesis PhD. So when I was considering this title, I pondered practice-led and creative-led and the Artefact and Exegesis PhD. I think that latter one is the most accurate, although probably creative-led is the most used. And I think that's part of the problem of this genre or this oeuvre or this mode of PhD, because the word creative is so ambiguous in its meaning that it's pretty well useless, I'd argue. And let's be honest, sometimes the word creative is used to justify a range of behaviours that can be the antithesis of research and scholarship. And I supervise and examine an array of artefact exegeses theses from design, performance, creative writing, sonic media, screen media, the full suite. And they are a challenging suite. Split decisions, that is divergent results, are very frequent in this mode of doctorate. So what that means is divergent results, split decisions. Students receive an A and a D, an A or an E, an A and an F. So that means they get a straight-through result with a D, rewriting and restructuring, a straight-through result, an A, with you're going to get a master's for this, mate, and a straight-through A and an F for fail. Now, that's unusual. It's an unusual split, and there are reasons for that split, and there are ways to fix those problems pretty easily that we will talk about shortly. But I did want to widen this discussion out, because this is not an issue of and for the creative arts. Some of you may know I've spent just about all of my academic life fighting hard against high culture and assumptions of cultural quality. You know, post-structuralism. You know, we're 35 years into these debates now. You just can't say that something has intrinsic quality. You couldn't say something had intrinsic quality in 1982. The idea that you're doing it in 2018 is a worry. And the idea that students are justifying research through these ideologies, which is what they are, about high culture, is causing some problems. So that's why the Artefact Exegesis Thesis is a better description. It also has much wider application than the high humanities and the creative arts. And right now we have two fantastic theses in speech pathology that's using creative-led artefact exegesis methods. And it is a method. I think that's what we need to be thinking about. It's not about disciplines, it's not about subjects, it's a method. And I think health studies in particular is really ripe for this method of research and this mode of research. So let me tell you about the Artefact and Exegesis Thesis, and perhaps the reasons why the split or divergent decisions emerge and strategies to fix it. So let's think about it. The Artefact and Exegesis Thesis is composed of an object. An artefact, an object, and that object can be digital or analog, visual or sonic. So we've got an object, right? There it is. And then we have an exegesis, which from the Greek, of course, means explanation. So the exegesis is between 30 and 40,000 words in length. We're going to talk about the exegesis shortly and what goes wrong and how to make it right, because most of what goes wrong in the artefact exegesis or creative-led thesis goes wrong in the exegesis. But let's just nail down the artefact for a moment. The artefact can be in a written form, so novel, novella, poetry, or a script. Design. It can be from architecture, some tech, so some coding, graphic interior design, furniture design, to name a few. Sonic, so sonic architecture, sonic art, podcasting, popular music theses. And the visual, fine art, film, screen arts, mixed media installations. So the diversity is really staggering and I think quite important. And look, fabulous too. The diversity is amazing. And that diversity, I think, should be celebrated and used much more effectively than we are at the moment. And we do need to ask the overt questions. Why does this mode of research exist? Why not deploy more conventional methods? And there is a reason. And I hope this analogy or metaphor helps you. When I used to teach creative or practice-led research methods, not only to undergraduates but to master students as well, I used to use the following an analogy. In fact, I used to take them outside and actually perform it. So the argument I always use is only use creative-led methods when you have to. So that is, conventional research can only take you so far. And you need to make a leap or a jump to the next stage of research, to the next stage of knowledge, beyond what is logical or can be created through the accumulative methods for knowledge generation. So in this circumstance, you've completed your literature review, you've got some nice strong research questions, and most importantly, this is the rub here, you know the limitations of knowledge, but then you need to create an original contribution to knowledge via an artefact that moves ahead of the research. So I've always described this as throwing a rock into a pond. So if you like, existing knowledge gets us to the edge of the water, right? So we've done our literature review, we've done all our stuff, and that's got us to the shoreline, the edge of the water. And the artefact is like a rock. We throw knowledge ahead into the pond. So the role of the object is to bounce knowledge forward, right? Jump it forward. Then the goal of the exegesis is to connect the shoreline, the limitations of knowledge, with the object thrown in advance of knowledge. So look, as you can see, this is a surprising, volatile and really exciting mode of research. It does move knowledge forward in really interesting and exciting and provocative ways. And that's why we do it. And that's fantastic. But then we've got to ensure the rigours of scholarship. And accountability, transparency and repeatability are really challenging in this method. Repeatability, I would argue, is almost impossible here. And that's okay, but we need to talk that through. And just using the word creative as a proxy for the value of repeatability doesn't cut it anymore. So this method, we can be accountable, we can be transparent, repeatability is challenging, so call a spade a shovel. Say repeatability is not possible in this method and explain the other innovations where people can track the quality and calibre of the research. And this is where we start to get problematic, I think, because the word creative starts to create shorthand and truncation on what are quite complicated research debates. The assumption that the artefact is art and that art is intrinsically knowledge is the sleight of hand that we're dealing with here. The artefact is not art, and art is not intrinsically knowledge. The object is just an object, and you have to prove, frame and shape the research around it. You've got to prove the original contribution to knowledge through the object or artefact. It is like a filter, if that metaphor is helpful. But the artefact means nothing in and of itself. And this is how students and supervisors get themselves into trouble. They spend 3 years making a film and then 3 months writing an exegesis that simply tells the tale about how the film was made. So it does stuff like plot, characterization, lighting, lenses. Really? And of course then the PhD either fails or receives the big split results. So I'm going to be clear here, and I apologise if I'm offending people, but I've seen too many students really destroyed by not framing this method correctly. So let me just really be clear here. A film is just a film. It's not research. A novel is just a novel. It's not research. A design is just a design. It's not research. And if you want to make the film or write the novel or design or a bit of tech, that's fantastic. Okay, if you want to make a film, you want to write a book, that's terrific. Knock yourself out. Great. But don't assume that you're going to get a PhD for it. And I'm being really hard here because for 20 years I've seen student after student and generation after generation after generation of scholars continue to make this mistake. And part of this comes from a lack of interdisciplinarity in the methodological discussions of creative-led research methods. So a very few number of scholars have provided a very few number of sort of textbooks on methods that everybody cites. And so innovation post-digitisation, post-Web 2, post-disintermediation, let alone post-structuralism, where no one actually cares about ideas of intrinsic quality. All that stuff has sort of been lost from the methodological debate. And we're forgetting, I think, the point of a PhD is an original contribution to knowledge, whatever the mode of the PhD. So therefore, I think it is important to remember the object, the artefact, is simply a stone in a pond, and it moves debates ahead. But in the exegesis, students have to explain how, through the artefact, research has been moved into a new terrain. And that's where words like art and creativity get seriously obstructionary. There is no intrinsic quality. And okay, say there is. You think there's intrinsic quality to something as a supervisor, that's great, that's brilliant, knock yourself out. But even if there is intrinsic quality, that has nothing to do with research, nothing. So you might make a quality film. That's great. But you're enrolled in a PhD. It's different. Therefore, students need to justify the method. Or put another way, if this is more helpful, why has the student chosen this mode of doctorate? And what can students do in this form of PhD that other methods do not allow them to do? So what I'm going to do now is present 5 quick strategies to ensure that you as a supervisor can really nail down this artefact, exegesis, thesis, and avoid the split decisions, okay? So tip 1 is be really clear about the limitations and the boundaries around the student's object. So what is the object? Be really clear about the genre of the object and its role in the thesis. Explain in the exegesis the nature of the artefact. Be really clear and explain why that platform was chosen. Also, I think we have to be really singular in what the object actually is. And just to give you one example of an A&F result that I saw, not at this university, can I say at another one, it was a performance-based thesis, and what happened was the F examiner, the examiner that gave it a fail, was given a video of the performance, and it was basically a low-quality video of the performance. It was basically just a static camera placed in front of a stage. And the examiner found that video really low quality and failed it because he thought he was examining the video of the performance, not the performance. See the slippage and the problem that occurs. So what is the artefact? So if it is a live performance, for our drama colleagues, and of course I've supervised a lot of these too, what I try and do is I get the examiners as close to the live performance as possible. So if they're assessing the performance, then they are assessing the performance and they are in a live audience. They're not getting a video of it. They're not getting sort of proxy artefacts that create obfuscation, create ambiguity. So be very clear about what the artefact is, so why a design was chosen, why a sonic artefact, and put a clear boundary around that. Second tip is don't confuse research and art. Now this is really crucial, and we have to assume that there's always this assumption, that examiners are terribly excited in working through a student's art. They're not at all. The artefact exegesis thesis is being assessed as research, as an original contribution to knowledge. Whether or not it's art or quality art or whatever is absolutely irrelevant. So the examiners want to know about the research, not the art. And that's why we use the word artefact, not art. 3, the examiners read the exegesis before engaging with the artefact. I think the greatest mistake that students and supervisors make is the assumption that the examiners are just really thrilled, really excited to read the novel, watch the film, listen to the sonic installation, and they're not. The overwhelming majority of examiners that do this mode, and again it's a specialist mode of examination too, read the exegesis first. So they need an explanation for what they're reading or seeing or hearing. So they require a frame, a demonstration of the research within the artefact. So we must never ever assume as supervisors that the artefact is self-standing in any way. In fact, a Flinders PhD student enrolled in this mode asked me recently about the weighting of the artefact and the exegesis. Now, the artefact is 60% and the exegesis is 40%. I think that's what the student was hoping. But of course, there is no weighting. The two parts are assessed together. So there's only framing. There's no weighting, there's only framing. And if examiners do not see the research in the artefact and how the artefact moves knowledge forward, and they see that via the exegesis, then the student will fail. So there's no weighting of the elements, there's simply a framing of the artefact by the exegesis. Boom. Okay, 4. Focus on the why, not the how. Oh, this is the one. As an examiner, this is the one. I can't tell you how many I've examined, particularly in design. I think there's something wrong with design and in creative writing where all the attention is on the how, not the why. The problematic exegesis explains how the novel was written, how the designs were done, how the film was made. Now, yes, the how is needed because that's methods, maybe methodology if you squint a bit, but the emphasis must be on the why. And exegeses in this mode focus much too much on the how, not the why. Remember, the how is easier. How is easy, why is hard. So don't tell an examiner how the book was written or how the design was configured. We don't care too much. Show the examiner why the artefact was necessary to further research. 5. Ensure the connection between the artefact and exegesis is overt. So, students and supervisors cannot be too obvious. We've got this very unusual mode of PhD where there are 2 bits to it. Examiners get 2 bits. Now, what the hell is going on between those bits? So they must be connected overtly and clearly into a PhD. We must not leave these components marinating in ambiguity or assumptions. We need to discuss how the artefact should be assessed. And remember, we're doing all of this work for 2 people, for examiners. So we need to make sure that the examiners have a really good sense about what are these 2 bits and what's the relationship between them. So I hope with these 5 tips, we as supervisors can start to reduce the risk of this mode of PhD, reduce the risk of failure, and reduce the risk of split decisions, and ensure a really high and powerful assessment of an artefact and exegesis thesis. So thank you so much for joining me as part of this STEP program, and I hope we have a good and robust conversation about this. I'm sure a lot of you will offer some commentary about this, which I welcome. And this area of the PhD is expanding in numbers. It's coming from a low base. It was always small, but it is increasing in numbers. So it is important that we get the setup for this mode of thesis accurate and correct. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this STEPS training program on behalf of the Office of Graduate Research at Flinders University.